Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to, I think it's now the third edition of the PSA live stream with the International Court of Justice. We know that in December, South Africa took measures to the ICJ, requesting for a ceasefire ultimately and for an end to the genocide. There was a favorable ruling, much better than we anticipated. And today we're back again for further measures from South Africa. So I'm Nazim Adam from the Palestine Solidarity Alliance. I'll manage some of the program today. We've also got Advocate Aslam Baba, Senior Counsel, who's been with us all the way and has given us great insight legally around this court. What we do have is a very important ruling that we're anticipating today. And that ruling is to hopefully bring some sort of respite to the millions of Palestinian people who are suffering under this scourge of a genocide, ethnic cleansing, and war crimes. So there's a lot of exciting things happening. And on the 10th of May, South Africa brought in these additional measures to the court request for a modification and an indication of the provisional measures. So Aslam, what is what is it that South Africa is really asking for in this?
So yes, Nazim, as you indicated to us, South Africa brought that application in December, and it was granted provisional measures on an urgent basis in January. And we know that Israel has not complied and has shown its criminal intent and continues to do so. It is a rogue state by any measure. So what South Africa then did was in March, South Africa sought additional provisional measures, or rather the implementation. When you will recall, the process of starvation began and still continues, and where Israel sought to starve the Palestinians as a weapon of war. That was not granted by the ICJ. The ICJ indicated that its initial provisional measures were sufficient in order for Israel to comply with it. We know that Israel has gone from bad to worse, if that is even possible, because I think everybody would argue that you start from worse with Israel and you don't start from bad. But be that as it may, not, what happened in South Africa on the 10th of May, as you indicated, South Africa then approached the ICJ and requested provisional measures, and what you said was the modification, and this is very important, modification of the previous provisional measures against Israel. So what South Africa said is that if we have regard to the provisional measures, it clearly is insufficient against a state as vicious and as non-compliant as Israel is. And these new measures call for Israel to immediately withdraw from Rafah and cease its military offensive. The application also requests that the modification of the previous provisional measures be done under Article 41 of the ICJ on the basis that the provisional measures previously, and I'm reading from there, the provisional measures previously indicated by the court are not capable of fully addressing the changed circumstances and new facts on which this request is founded. So last week, we saw South Africa make representation to the ICJ. There were further questions that were posed, and both South Africa and Israel then responded to those requests from the ICJ. And South Africa stated in its application, if Rafah, and this is what the entire aspect is, if Rafah is destroyed, there will be little left of Gaza or the prospects for the survival of Palestinian life in the territory. Already we know, this is not mentioned in there, but from the quotation that I'm reading, but we know that people are talking of between 38 years to 48 years to restore Gaza back to its position. The quotation then continues, the risk to Palestinians in Rafah is particularly severe. Many, including large numbers of Palestinian children, have been killed or injured already. The Israeli assault on Rafah is deliberately inflicting on Palestinians conditions of life calculated to bring about their physical destruction. So we see the nature of South Africa's application. It is very focused. It is primed to stop this continuation of this genocidal conduct with murderous intent. We've also seen now settlers, and one would find it hard to say that the settlers now form an independent front. One would normally regard them as an extreme right wing. We see the United States seeking to carve the settlers as a fringe, but one would argue that they're doing exactly what the Israeli government wants to happen.
Thanks, Aslam. Obviously, as all eyes are on Gaza, we also know that the West Bank is pretty much on a boil as well. And like with Gaza, when the IDF goes in, they don't just go and do what they claim to be, which is try and root out Hamas. They go in and destroy and kill, destroy infrastructure, water, sanitation, electricity, roads, everything gets damaged like they did in Jenin, and they leave a bloodbath behind them. Just to say that on our discussion today, great to have Usman Noor, who's with us, as well as Dr. Salah, who is from Gaza. So welcome for our Palestinian brothers who are joining us on this review of the ICJ. We are anticipating something positive from this. I know in our initial hearing, when we listened to the South African presentation, we were very excited. And then we heard the Israelis, and we didn't expect that much would come from it. But we actually got a very favorable ruling around what should happen. We know then consequently, Israel has ignored everything in terms of the provisional measures set out by the ICJ. And now we have these additional modifications that South Africa has asked for. It's a really strong case in terms of its need. What are the implications? And remember, today is an open forum. So before we go and link up with the ICJ, Aslam, just your quick thoughts, and then we'll ask others same question. What are you anticipating, and what are you hoping for?
Yeah, the sense is that this would be a historic moment if the ICJ is to really provide those additional and altered measures, because we find that the rule of law is just being ignored. And we find that the United States and the NATO powers are standing behind Israel, despite the fact that Israel is acting illegally. So I'm hoping that we get a stronger indication from the ICJ, and that they actually, in this instance, call for a ceasefire, because you're looking at the destruction of a people at this stage, in Rafah particularly.
Okay. Usman, would you like to come in and share what your anticipation is, what your expectation from the ICJ in particular?
Sure, thanks for inviting me. I would like to look at this through the lens of imperialism and colonialism, and seeing it as the great unveiling of what imperialism truly is and how it is defeated. It is often said that the states that are most supportive of Israel are the former colonial powers, European West and the US. And these are states that have historically committed genocide, eradicated native communities. The US is built on that. Australia, another state that doesn't recognize Palestine, is built on genocide. And many of us who've read, these histories seen it in textbooks. I think we're seeing the raw reality of what that is. It is a mentality of eradication, of total denial of one's right to exist, the basic values, the basic right to speak, to have culture, to have history, to have poetry. That's what we're seeing right now. We've been seeing now even libraries being burnt, library books being burnt, and they've already destroyed all the universities and colleges. And I think what's been so powerful for the world to see is South Africa's leadership in challenging this. Yes. I think it has been a roar of absolute courage from South Africa, and clearly South Africa knows very well and has a history of resistance to it, and for the whole of the world. And we're seeing that beautiful revival of that right now. As to what we can expect from the ICJ, I hope a positive outcome, but at the same time, we now see the reality of what Israel stands for and what it's doing, and its total disregard for the law. So whether or not it leads to practical benefits to the people in Gaza is another question. I think from this unveiling that we're about to see, we also have to move into a state of action, because the political leaders that ought to be intervening to use their moral and legal obligation to stop these things are not. We're still seeing the arms being provided, and we're still seeing the murderous rampages, in fact, increasing in the West Bank. And so I think from here, we should continue to talk as activists and as concerned citizens and as people of conscience worldwide to mobilize for action to make sure that the killing stops.
Thanks, Noor. And we'll come back to you with some of the other actions that you're also busy with later. So the program would be just this input, and then we're going to go to the live stream. We'll monitor that, take some discussions amongst ourselves in the chat rooms maybe, and then post the presentation, we'll have a review from everyone. Dr. Salah, your anticipation from the ICJ?
Everybody, and thank you about this invitation. I send the best wishes and my people in Gaza and all Palestine to South Africa. And we respect what he make it, and we really thank you about in this country, because we know and learn about this way, about what we make it about South Africa, what Nelson Mandela say, Palestine, South Africa not be free, in Palestine he be under the occupation. That's mean about in the South Africa, he give it us a lesson about in the humanity, lesson about to struggle, about in the imperialism and the capitalism and the occupation. And all of the people of the Palestine respect about in this way. And we thank you in this way. And South Africa, it's not give it, go on the court, just he make it many activities between he go on this court. And now in this court he be يعني عنوان ايش بنسميها؟ title تحكي بقى احكي بالعربي؟ تمام اوكي. I have my colleague maybe better than he translate for me. Iman.
That's fine. That's fine.
I will be the translator.
Okay. الجنوب أفريقيا باتت عنوان للعدالة والإنسانية.
South Africa become like a title for humanity and justice.
وانضمت إليها مجموعة كبيرة من
a lot of world countries.
وهذا مهم لدعم هذه القضية العادلة.
And so this is important to believe in this case, Palestinian case.
ونأمل في المرة الرابعة التي تذهب فيها جنوب أفريقيا لطلب تدابير احتياطية إضافية أن تنجح وأن تستجيب لها المحكمة.
We hope in the fifth or fourth time that South Africa go to the ICJ and to take like a process to arrest or to do something for Palestinian issue or case.
ونأمل أن يكون هذه التدابير حاسمة وقاطعة لا تقبل اللبس ولا تقبل اللبس، وأن تضمن أيضا وقف للعدوان الإسرائيلي وحرب الإبادة على كل قطاع غزة وضمان تدفق المساعدات الإنسانية.
And we hope that South Africa will guarantee to stop the genocide which committed by Israeli occupation against Gaza Strip war, and to continue the entry of humanitarian aid trucks.
هذه أحد الطرق لضمان وقف الإبادة الجماعية.
This is one of the ways to stop the genocide crime
والمحاسبة عليها
and to accountability on it.
وأيضا فرصة لتوليد أوسع عملية ضغط دولي لضمان إنفاذ تدابير محكمة العدل الدولية.
Also, it is a chance to get the world pressure.
وخاصة في ظل التفسيرات المتباينة لقرارات محكمة العدل الدولية السابقة. أوكي؟ وفي ظل التفسيرات المتباينة لقرار محكمة أو تدابير محكمة العدل السابقة بشكل حاسم، إذا ما قيل وقف العدوان هذا يعني أننا يجب أن نذهب إلى مجلس الأمن، ونحن ندرك أن الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية يمكن أن تصوت على قرار محكمة غير قابل للطعن، وهذا يتطلب توليد تحالف إنساني دولي لضمان احترام تدابير محكمة العدل الدولية.
We hope to generation an international alliance to do what international court for justice decisions.
الأوضاع في فلسطين الآن وبالذات في قطاع غزة غاية في الخطورة والتعقيد.
The conditions in Gaza Strip and Palestine in general is like so dangerous.
الآن يجب إعلان غزة منطقة مجاعة.
It is short to announce that Gaza is in a famine case.
بسبب منع تدفق المساعدات الإنسانية للأسبوع الثالث على التوالي.
Because there is no entry for any humanitarian aid trucks for the third week.
وإذا تركت إسرائيل فهي دمرت الآن أكثر من 80% من منشآت ومباني قطاع غزة.
Also, Israeli occupation destructed more than 80% of Gaza instructions.
وتستمر في مجازرها وقتلها للمدنيين في كل أنحاء القطاع.
And it's also continuing by killing all Palestinians in all Gaza Strip.
وبالذات في شمال غزة وجباليا التي تتعرض للمجزرة.
Especially in Jabalia camp, which located in the southern of Gaza Strip.
وكذلك رفح التي يتوسع فيها الهجوم البري.
Also Rafah, which is now in a military operation.
وأيضا في ظل استمرار العقوبات الجماعية المفروضة على سكان قطاع غزة.
Also collective punishment on Gaza Strip people.
وأيضا في ظل أو استمرار عمليات النزوح المتكرر، وفي ظل مناخ وبيئة تنتشر فيها الجوع والعطش والأمراض.
Forcibly displaced citizens with a bad environment.
وفي ظل إغلاق المعابر ومنع خروج المرضى للسفر أو للعلاج.
Also closing the borders and deprived wounded and injured people to get out of Gaza to take treatment.
ونأمل أن يستمر نضالنا من أجل الحرية والعدالة، ونحن مؤمنين أننا ذاهبون باتجاه مزيد من التغيير في العالم بما يدعم مبادئ الإنسانية ويدعم حرية فلسطين.
We hope to go through change and all around the world which support humanitarian and justice.
ونؤمن أن جنوب أفريقيا وأنكم كنشطاء وأحرار ستبقى أسماءكم جميعا محفورة بأحرف من نور في التاريخ الفلسطيني والتاريخ الإنساني.
And we believe in you like an activist from South Africa that you do your all what you can to do for Palestinian issue.
ومعا من أجل ضمان وقف الإبادة الجماعية، معا من أجل تفعيل كل وتوظيف كل الطاقة الإنسانية من أجل وقف هذا العدوان على فلسطين وعلى قطاع.
Together genocide war which committed against Gazans people.
Thank
The
you.
court meets today to deliver its
Thank you. We go live to The Hague now.
its decision on the request for the modification of the order of March 28, 2024, regarding provisional measures submitted by South Africa on May 10, 2024, in the case concerning application of the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide in the Gaza Strip, South Africa versus Israel. For reasons made known to me, Judges Abraham, Shwe, and Iwasawa, who duly participated in the deliberation and the final vote, are not in a position to take their seat on the bench today. Judge ad hoc Barak, who also duly participated in the deliberations and the final vote, is unable to join us today for family reasons. I recall that on December 29, 2023, South Africa filed in the registry of the court an application instituting proceedings against Israel concerning alleged violations in the Gaza Strip of obligations under the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, to which I shall refer as the Genocide Convention. The application of South Africa contained a request for the indication of provisional measures. After hearing the parties, the court indicated certain provisional measures by an order issued on January 26, 2024. By a letter dated February 12, 2024, South Africa, referring to, I quote, the developing circumstances in Rafah, end of quote, called upon the court urgently to exercise its power under Article 75, paragraph 1 of the Rules of Court. The registrar informed the parties of court's decision in response to that communication by letter on 16 February 2024. On March 6, 2024, South Africa requested the court, I quote, to indicate further provisional measures and or to modify its provisional measures indicated on January 26, 24. By an order of March 28, 2024, the court reaffirmed the provisional measures indicated in its order of January 26, 2024, and indicated certain additional provisional measures. On May 10, 2024, South Africa submitted to the court what it described as an urgent request for the modification and indication of provisional measures, pursuant to Article 41 of the statute and Articles 75 and 76 of the Rules of Court. In accordance with usual practice, I shall not read the introductory paragraphs of the order, which set out the procedural history of the case. I shall also omit or summarize some other paragraphs. I shall therefore begin by reading the order at paragraph 20. The court begins by noting that, in its view, South Africa's present request is a request for the modification of the order of March 28, 2024. For this reason, the court must determine whether the conditions set forth in Article 76, paragraph 1 of the Rules of Court have been fulfilled. That paragraph reads as follows, I quote, at the request of a party or proprio motu, the court may, at any time before the final judgment in the case, revoke or modify any decision concerning provisional measures if, in its opinion, some change in the situation justifies such revocation or modification, end of quote. The court must first ascertain whether, taking into account the information that the parties have provided with respect to the current situation, there is reason to conclude that the situation that warranted the decision set out in its order of March 28, 2024, has changed since that time. If the court finds that there was a change in the situation since the delivery of its earlier order, it will then have to consider whether such a change justifies a modification of its earlier decision concerning provisional measures. Any such modification would be appropriate only if the general conditions laid down in Article 41 of the Statute of the Court were also met in this instance. The Court thus begins by determining whether there has been a change in the situation that warranted the decision set out in its order of March 28, 2024. The Court recalls that in its order of January 26, 2024, it noted that the military operation conducted by Israel following the attack of October 7, 2023, had resulted in, I quote, a large number of deaths and injuries, as well as the massive destruction of homes, the forcible displacement of the vast majority of the population, and extensive damage to civilian infrastructure. End of quote. In its decision communicated to the parties by letters of 16 February 2024, the Court noted, quoting the United Nations Secretary General, that the developments in the Gaza Strip and Rafah in particular, I quote, would exponentially increase what was already a humanitarian nightmare with untold regional consequences. End of quote. The Court further records that in its order of March 28, 2024, it observed with regret that the catastrophic living conditions of the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip had deteriorated further since January 2024, especially in view of the prolonged and widespread deprivation of food and other basic necessities to which the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip had been subjected. In the present order, the Court notes that the catastrophic humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip, which, as stated in its order of January 26, 2024, was at serious risk of deteriorating, has deteriorated, and has done so even further since the Court adopted its order of March 28, 2024. In this regard, the Court observes that the concern that it expressed in its decision communicated to the parties on February 16, 2024, with respect to the developments in Rafah have materialized, and that the humanitarian situation is now to be characterized as disastrous. After weeks of intensification of military bombardments of Rafah, where more than 1 million Palestinians had fled as a result of Israeli evacuation orders, covering more than 3/4 of Gaza's entire territory, on May 6, 2024, nearly 100,000 Palestinians were ordered by Israel to evacuate the eastern portion of Rafah and relocate to Al-Mawasi and Khan Yunis areas ahead of a planned military offensive. The military ground offensive in Rafah, which Israel started on May 7, 2024, is still ongoing and has led to new evacuation orders. As a result, according to United Nations reports, nearly 800,000 people have been displaced from Rafah as at May 18, 2024. The Court considered that the aforementioned developments, which are exceptionally grave, in particular the military offensive in Rafah and the resulting repeated large-scale displacement of already extremely vulnerable Palestinian population in the Gaza Strip, constitute a change in the situation within the meaning of Article 76 of the Rules of Court. The Court is also of the view that provisional measures indicated in its order of March 28, 2024, as well as those reaffirmed therein, do not fully address the consequences arising from the change in the situation previously explained, thus justifying the modification of these measures. However, in order to modify its earlier decision concerning provisional measures, the Court must still satisfy itself that the general conditions laid down in Article 41 of the Statute of the Court are met in the current situation. The Court next turns to the conditions for the indication of provisional measures. It recalls that in its orders of January 26, 2024 and March 28, 2024, it concluded that, prima facie, it had jurisdiction pursuant to Article 9 of the Genocide Convention to entertain the case. The Court sees no reason to revisit that conclusion for the purposes of deciding on the present request. In the order of January 26, 2024, the Court also found that at least some of the rights claimed by South Africa under the Genocide Convention and for which it was seeking protection were plausible, namely the right of the Palestinians in Gaza to be protected from acts of genocide and related prohibited acts mentioned in Article 3, and the right of South Africa to seek Israel's compliance with the latter's obligation under the Convention. The Court saw no reason to revisit this conclusion in its order of March 28, 2024. The Court likewise sees no reason to do so for the purposes of deciding on the present request. It further considers that, by their very nature, at least some of the provisional measures sought pursuant to the present request are aimed at preserving the rights claimed by the applicant that the Court has found to be plausible. The Court must next consider whether the current situation entails a risk of irreparable prejudice to the plausible rights claimed by South Africa and whether there is urgency. The Court recalls in this regard that it has previously concluded that in view of the fundamental values sought to be protected by the Genocide Convention, the plausible rights in question in these proceedings are of such a nature that prejudice to them is capable of causing irreparable harm. The Court recalls that on May 7, 2024, Israel began a military offensive in Rafah following weeks of intensified bombardment, and that as a result, approximately 800,000 Palestinians were displaced from Rafah as at May 18, 2024. The Court notes that senior United Nations officials have consistently underscored the immense risks associated with the military offensive in Rafah. For instance, on May 3, 2024, the spokesperson of the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs warned that an assault on Rafah would put, I quote, hundreds of thousands of people at imminent risk of death, end of quote, and would severely impact the humanitarian operation in the entire Gaza Strip, which is run primarily out of Rafah. On May 6, 2024, the United Nations Children's Fund indicated that about half of the approximately 1.2 million Palestinians sheltering in Rafah were children, and warned that military operations therein would result in, I quote, the few remaining basic services and infrastructure they need to survive being totally destroyed, end of quote. United Nations sources indicate that the aforementioned risks have started to materialize and will intensify even further if the operation continues. For instance, on May 8, 2024, the Director General of the World Health Organization stated the Al-Najjar Hospital, one of the last remaining medical facilities in the Rafah Governorate, was no longer functional due to the ongoing hostilities in its vicinity. On May 17, 2024, the World Food Programme warned that it had been able to access its warehouses in Rafah it hadn't been able to access its warehouses in Rafah for over a week, and observed that, I quote, "The incursion into Rafah is a significant setback to recent modest progress on access," end of quote. On the basis of information before it, the court is not convinced that the evacuation efforts and related measures that Israel affirms to have undertaken to enhance the security of civilians in the Gaza Strip, and in particular those recently displaced from the Rafah Governorate, are sufficient to alleviate the immense risk to which the Palestinian population is exposed as a result of the military offensive in Rafah. The court observed, for instance, that according to a statement by the Commissioner General of the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees in the Near East, Mr. Philippe Lazzarini, on May 18, 2024, I quote, "The areas that peoples are fleeing to now do not have safe water supplies or sanitation facilities. Al-Mawasi, as one example, is a sandy 14 square kilometer agricultural land where people are left out in the open with little to no buildings or roads. It lacks the minimal conditions to provide emergency humanitarian assistance in a safe and dignified manner," end of quote. The court observed that Israel has not provided sufficient information concerning the safety of the population during the evacuation process, or the availability in Al-Mawasi area of the necessary amount of water, sanitation, food, medicine, and shelter for the 800,000 Palestinians that have evacuated thus far. Consequently, the court is of the view that Israel has not sufficiently addressed and dispelled the concerns raised by its military offensive in Rafah. In light of the considerations set out in the preceding sections of the order, and taking account of the provisional measures indicated in its orders of January 26, 2024 and March 28, 2024, the court finds that the current situation arising from Israel's military offensive in Rafah entails a further risk of irreparable prejudice to the plausible rights claimed by South Africa, and that there is urgency in the sense that there exists a real and imminent risk that such prejudice will be caused before the court gives its final decision. The court concludes, on the basis of the aforementioned considerations, that the circumstances of the case require to modify its decision set out in its order of March 28, 2024. The court records that in accordance with Article 75, paragraph 2 of its rules, when a request for the indication of provisional measures has been made, it has the power under its statute to indicate measures that are not in whole or in part other than those requested. In the present case, having considered the terms of the provisional measures requested by South Africa and the circumstances of the case, the court found that the measures to be indicated need not be identical to those requested. The court considered that, in conformity with its obligations under the Genocide Convention, Israel must immediately halt its military offensive and any other action in the Rafah governorate which may inflict on the Palestinian group in Gaza conditions of life that could bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. The court recalls that in its order of January 26, 2024, it ordered Israel inter alia to, I quote, take effective measures to prevent the destruction and ensure the preservation of evidence related to allegations of acts within the scope of Article 2 and Article 3 of the Genocide Convention, end of quote. In the present circumstances, the court is also of the view that in order to preserve evidence related to allegations of acts falling within the scope of Article 2 and Article 3 of the Genocide Convention, Israel must take effective measures to ensure the unimpeded access to the Gaza Strip of any commission of inquiry, fact-finding mission, or other investigative body mandated by competent organs of the United Nations to investigate allegations of genocide. The court also considers that the catastrophic situation in Gaza confirmed the need for the immediate and effective implementation of the measures indicated in its orders of January 26, 2024 and March 28, 2024, which are applicable throughout the Gaza Strip, including in Rafah. In these circumstances, the court finds it necessary to reaffirm the measures indicated in those orders. In so doing, the court wishes to emphasize that the measure indicated in paragraph 51(2)(a) of its order of March 28, 2024, requiring, I quote, the unhindered provision at scale by all concerned of urgently needed basic services and humanitarian assistance, end of quote, necessitates that the respondent maintain open land crossing points, and in particular the Rafah crossing. In view of the specific provisional measures it has decided to indicate, the court considered that Israel must submit a report to the court on all measures taken to give effect to this order within 1 month from the date of this order. The report so provided will then be communicated to South Africa, which shall be given the opportunity to submit to the court its comments thereon. The court recalls that its orders on provisional measures under Article 41 of the statute have binding effect and thus create international legal obligations for any party to whom the provisional measures are addressed. The court underlined that the present order is without prejudice to any findings concerning the respondent's compliance with the orders of January 26, 2024 and March 28, 2024. In its orders of January 26, 2024 and March 28, 2024, the court expressed its grave concern over the fate of the hostages abducted during the attacks in Israel on October 7, 2023, and held since then by Hamas and other armed groups, and called for their immediate and unconditional release. The court finds it deeply troubling that many of these hostages remain in captivity and reiterates its call for their immediate and unconditional release. I shall now read out the operative part of the order. For these reasons, the court, by 13 votes to 2, reaffirms the provisional measures indicated in its orders of 26 January 2024 and March 28, 2024, which should be immediately and effectively implemented. In favor, President Salam, Judges Abraham, Yusuf, Shway, Bandari, Iwasawa, Nolte, Chardsworth, Brandt, Gomez-Robledo, Cleveland, Oresco, Tladi. Against, Vice President Sebutinde, Judge ad hoc Barak. 2. Indicates the following provisional measures. The State of Israel shall, in conformity with its obligations under the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, and in view of the worsening conditions of life faced by civilians in the Rafah Governorate, A, by 13 votes to 2, immediately halt its military offensive and any other action in the Rafah Governorate which may inflict on the Palestinian group in Gaza conditions of life that would bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. In favor, President Salam, Judges Abraham, Yusuf, Shway, Bandari, Iwasawa, Nolte, Charlesworth, Brandt, Gomez Robledo, Cleveland, Oresco, Tladi. Against, Vice President Sebutinde, Judge ad hoc Barak. By 13 votes to 2, maintain open the Rafah crossing for unhindered provision at scale of urgently needed basic services and humanitarian assistance. In favor, President Salam, Judges Abraham, Yusuf, Shway, Bandari, Iwasawa, Nolte, Charlesworth, Brandt, Gomez Robledo, Cleveland, Oresco, Tladi. Against, Vice President Sebutinde, Judge ad hoc Barak. C, by 13 votes to 2, take effective measures to ensure the unimpeded access to the Gaza Strip of any commission of inquiry, fact-finding mission, or other investigative body mandated by competent organs of the United Nations to investigate allegations of genocide. In favor, President Salam, Judges Abraham, Yusuf, Shway, Bandari, Iwasawa, Nolte, Charlesworth, Brandt, Gomez Robledo, Cleveland, Oresco, Tladi. Against, Vice President Sebutinde, Judge ad hoc Barak. 3, by 13 votes to 2, decides that the State of Israel shall submit a report to the court on all measures taken to give effect to this order within 1 month as from the date of this order. In favor, President Salam, Judges Abraham, Yusuf, Shway, Bandari, Iwasawa, Nolte, Charlesworth, Brandt, Gomez Robledo, Cleveland, Oresco, Tladi. Against, Vice President Sebutinde, Judge ad hoc Barak. I shall now call on the Registrar to read the operative part of the order in French.
Par ces motifs, la Cour, 1, par 13 voix contre 2, réaffirme les mesures conservatoires indiquées dans ses ordonnances des 26 janvier et 28 mars 2024 qui doivent être immédiatement et effectivement mises en œuvre. Pour M. Salam Président, M. Abraham Youssouf, Mme Shway, M. Bandari Iwasawa Nolte, Mme Charlesworth, M. Brandt Gomez Robledo, Mme Cleveland, M. Orescu Tladi, juge. Contre, Mme Sebutinde, vice-présidente, M. Barak, juge ad hoc. 2. Indique les mesures conservatoires suivantes. L'État d'Israël doit, conformément aux obligations lui incombant au titre de la Convention pour la prévention et la répression du crime de génocide, et au vu de la dégradation des conditions d'existence auxquelles sont soumis les civils dans le gouvernorat de Rafah, a, par 13 voix contre 2, arrêté immédiatement son offensive militaire et toute autre action menée dans le gouvernorat de Rafah qui serait susceptible de soumettre le groupe des Palestiniens de Gaza à des conditions d'existence capables d'entraîner sa destruction physique totale ou partielle. Pour M. Salam Président, M. Abraham Youssouf, Mme Shway, M. Bandari Iwasawa Nolte, Madame Charlesworth, Messieurs Brand, Gomez Robledo, Madame Cleveland, Messieurs Orescu, Tladi, juge, contre, Madame Seboutinde, vice-présidente, Monsieur Barak, juge ad hoc. B. Par 13 voix contre 2. Maintenir ouvert le point de passage de Rafah pour que puisse être assurée, sans restriction et à grande échelle, la fourniture des services de base et de l'aide humanitaire requis de toute urgence.
Okay, everyone, we're going to break away from the ICJ as they read the orders in French. We're going to go into our discussion. We'll ask our tech people to just mute the video feed. Are we good? Okay, so Ahmed, you'll just keep monitoring that. If there's anything further that comes from the ICJ in English, we'll take that as well. Advocate Baba, got a few legal people on the panel today, so that's great. You've heard the ruling and the orders that the president of the ICJ has read out. What's your thoughts? Let's summarize quickly. What is it that they are saying?
Yes, so it was difficult to hear, but what they're saying is that the orders of the 26th of January and of March are applicable through all, including Rafah. And so Israel has to comply with those. But it also believes that the situation has gotten worse, and it laid out the legal principles that in order for them to consider these aspects, they firstly had to have jurisdiction. And they said jurisdiction was not an issue because it had already been determined in the previous case. So the ICJ has jurisdiction. Then they said that there has to be a difference in what was...
Opinion to the order of the court. Judges Nolte, Orescu, and Tladi append declaration to the order of the court. Judge ad hoc Barak appends a dissenting opinion to the order of the court. The text of the order is available from today in typescript. It will be available shortly on the court's website. The printed text will be available in due course. As the court has no further business before it today, I declare the sitting closed.
Okay. Yeah, no, just to say that there were pending statements from some of the judges. Okay, so Aslam, let's get back to that. So yes, the previous measures apply, and they apply to Rafah, and I think affirming that there's concern that that was not everything was adhered to.
Yes, and so they've also implemented an additional measure in that, you know, the Israel has UNRWA, you know, it has been specifically targeting UNRWA, but it has been targeting United Nations facilities and United Nations personnel as well. And the United Nations has been trying to get people to go and provide an independent report. And so in what they've added to this, apart from the fact that Israel has to give a report of what it is doing in complying with the ICJ's ruling, is that they should allow unfettered access to the United Nations and independent parties, international bodies, investigations into the genocidal conduct that is being carried out in Gaza. So that is certainly a most fundamental shift. And it's also telling Israel, you can't carry on in this way. You can't do this with impunity and expect nothing to come off it. And they also stressed in the ruling, which was very interesting, to say that these orders that are given, there's an obligation by states who are members of the Genocide Convention and who are members of the United Nations to carry out the obligations in terms of the ICJ rulings. So that is fundamentally a huge slap against Israel, telling it in a very, I wouldn't say it's indirect, I would say in a very direct fashion. But firstly, you are non-compliant. Secondly, open the doors. We know, for example, Al Jazeera has just been recently banned in Israel. I mean, they're closing every avenue of getting news out there, and it just smacks of a criminal not wanting its conduct to be known by the world.
Yeah. Thanks. We obviously going to take this discussion further. I'm just getting some immediate responses. So we'll go to Dr. Salah. If you can give us your immediate response from what you've heard from the ICJ.
Yes, thank you. نعم، قرار المحكمة والآن بإضافة تدابير احتياطية جديدة بوقف العمليات العسكرية في مدينة رفح وضمان تدفق المساعدات الإنسانية وحماية الفلسطينيين من جريمة الإبادة الجماعية هو تطور نوعي ولافت.
The decision for the court stopping the genocide war against innocent people and to continue the entry of humanitarian aid is a development in this case.
وهذا الآن قوبل باستمرار كما رأيت الآن في وسائل الإعلام قوبل برفض إسرائيلي أي وإصرار على مواصلة جريمة الإبادة الجماعية.
As I see now in media that Israeli probation rejected this decision.
وهذا يتطلب إلى جوار هذا القرار تشكيل أوسع تحالف دولي إنساني لضمان إنفاذ تدابير محكمة العدل الدولية.
Which requires a global or world community alliance to make sure that the decision will be applied.
وهذا سيشكل إلى جوار قرار محكمة العدل محكمة الجنايات الدولية بإصدار مذكرات اعتقال إلى مزيد من الضغوط على دولة الاحتلال، ونأمل أن تنجح هذه الضغوط في ضمان فتح المعابر وإدخال رجال المساعدات ودخول أيضا فرق التقصي على الحقائق الدولية.
Which will make pressure on Israeli occupation state or it's not state.
من أجل ضمان تدفق المساعدات وضمان دخول فرق المساعدة فرق التحقيق.
To make sure to open crossing borders and to continuing the entry of humanitarian aid trucks.
وسنشكل إضافية في يد حركة التضامن من أجل تصعيد نضالها لوقف جريمة الإبادة الجماعية في داخل قطاع غزة.
And will be also a pressure to stop the genocide crowd.
وأيضا هو سيشكل أداة سياسية ودبلوماسية للدول للذهاب إلى مجلس الأمن رغم إمكانية استخدام حق النقد الفيتو.
And also it makes a diplomatic committee to go to Security Council if we also know that the US will use veto.
والأصل ألا تستخدم لأنه لا يجوز استخدام حق النقد الفيتو على قرار محكمة.
We shouldn't do this because it's not acceptable.
ونأمل فعلا يعني أن تواصل جنوب أفريقيا هذا العمل وهذا المسعى المهم الذي نقدر عليه ولن ننساه، وأيضا أن نواصل كل جهودنا باستخدام مختلف الطرق التضامنية لوقف هذا العدوان ومساندة نضال الشعب الفلسطيني في مواجهة الأبرتايد والاستعمار وجرائم الإبادة.
We thank and appreciate South Africa efforts, and we hope that we'll continue this effort and it's standing beside Gaza.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for those thoughts. And certainly, yes, we do anticipate that Israel will reject this. I'm going to go, before I come to you, Osman, I know you've got a lot to add on to this, yourself being a barrister in the UK. But I'm going to go to some sisters, some of our comrades. So Shabnam, are you ready to come in and just give a quick opinion on what you've heard? You're muted. Okay, I'm not getting through to Shabnam. Firoza? Right, okay. Osman, while we're waiting for connectivity there, your quick thoughts.
Thanks so much. I just wanted to reflect on something I learned early on when this genocide began, because my wife is Palestinian. I'm not actually from Palestine, so I learned things from her. And she shared with me a little bit of history from 1988, which was the first, what period called the First Intifada, which was, from my understanding, a largely peaceful rising up for resistance and not going to work and boycotting, the kind of activity that South Africa did in its anti-apartheid struggle. And so I learned that there was this video that came out of Israelis bashing the back of a Palestinian's arm and breaking it with the back of an assault rifle. And it was a 16-year-old boy. They broke his arm. And this made its way to the US press. And there was this kind of cognitive realization that, you know, this is cruel, what's going on. And so there was an awareness rising. Henry Kissinger at that time had a meeting with the leaders of Jewish and Zionist groups in the US to discuss this issue. And the memorandum of that meeting got leaked. And what Henry Kissinger tells the Zionists is, in order for them to carry on what they're doing, they need to throw out the press like we do in South Africa. And that's his exact quote. He said, let's do what we do to South Africans and do it there and throw out the press, because the only problem here is people are becoming aware of it. That was his concern. That was it. And the second thing he said, he advised Israelis to, rather than restrain Palestinians, he advised them just to shoot to kill. Why? Because if you restrain them, then you can get into difficulties with the law, because you lose your self-defense justification because they're already restrained. And so then you can't kill them. So he said, just kill them off, and get out the press. And so the reason I say all of this is how deeply complicit the US has always been in the genocide of the Palestinians. And we see that that is so deeply embedded in the power structures of the US democratic institutions. We are still seeing Biden deny entirely that there's a genocide. And it is just so obvious to anyone with eyes, and now so obvious to the highest institutions of the judiciary, that this is what's going on. And I just wonder, what will it take for these people in power to actually stop what's going on? Because that's the priority, right? So I hope, anyway, I'm saying this in a happy mood. I'm glad that this is, and I'm applaud South Africa, but that's my sentiment.
Thanks, Usman. Aslam, I'm going to come back to you. Guys, please just feel free to unmute yourself if you want to say anything, and try and get your cameras on. So this is a discussion with people who are active in the human rights law and within the solidarity movement. We've got a public screening on YouTube as well. There's over a few hundred people there already. So people are listening in, and we need to give, I think, some sort of understanding to them. I've noted a few things. One of the measures is that the 26 January measures and the 28 March measures need to be implemented immediately, which the ICJ has not necessarily enforced in any way, and I don't know if they have powers of enforcement. So that's my first question, is what are the powers of this ICJ to enforce their measures? The second is, hi Yvonne, welcome. We're gonna get to you now. All right, we'll get to you now. You can just mute yourself if that's okay. All right. Yes. All right, thank you. Then we've got the order that today in that Israel must immediately halt all its military offensive. I don't know if I heard correctly because the sound was a bit off. There was, for me, a statement clearly that Israel needs to halt its military offensive and prevent the physical destruction in whole or part of Gaza and the Palestinian people there. That the Rafah border needs to be opened. And then Aslam, you raised this other one, which is, I think, very, very significant. And that's there must be a clear opening for any fact-finding mission through the organs, the national, international organs like the UN and so forth, to be able to do their work. And what does that offer us? Is there an option for South Africa to take a lead in setting up some sort of fact-finding mission to go and investigate this plausible genocide, which the initial measure spoke about? And then obviously the last one, which they did the last time, is for Israel to report back to them within a month. Aslam, your thoughts, have I summarized it? And what are these powers that the ICJ can do? And what are the implications for Israel?
So Nazim, that's very important. But I think one thing we forgot to say right at the beginning is congratulations to South Africa. They succeeded in the application. And I think we need to emphasize that. What we are discussing is then subsequent orders that are granted, in terms of which there were votings, as you noted, 13-2, and the two dissentings was Sibutende, which is the deputy president of the court, and you know at the last hearing that she also voted against every resolution that went against Israel, and the other one was Barak. And Barak is the Israeli representative on the board, on the bench rather. So yes, the issue is your question is now, how can the ICJ enforce its orders against Israel? And the ICJ is a court which pronounces but does not enforce. So the enforcement mechanism is now that Israel does not want to comply with it, which a civil and normal state, and that Israel calls itself the only democracy in the Middle East, which is clearly not the case. It ought to comply with it. If it doesn't, it then goes to the Security Council. And at the Security Council, we know that the United States will veto any enforcement order against Israel. And the next stage is then to take it to the General Assembly and under the Uniting for Peace resolution. And it is at that stage where Israel can be sanctioned by sanctions being imposed. Israel can be stopped from participating in United Nations activities, and Palestine can be recognized as a full-fledged member. It currently has observer status, but we've seen that there's tremendous will throughout the world to get Palestine admitted as a state and as a full-time member. We've seen that coming from Spain, we've seen it coming from Ireland, and we've seen it coming from Norway. The countries in South America are already fully behind this. Africa is behind, Asia is behind. So the majority of the world supports this. So yes, that's the route of enforcement that needs to go ahead, and the repercussions that, or rather the penalties that could fall on Israel.
Okay, I'd like to bring Yvonne in. Yvonne, I see you driving. I don't know if you caught any of the ruling, and just your quick thoughts.
Again, South Africa has played a wonderful role, showing the rest of the world, especially the West, how humanity and justice are delivered and should be delivered. You know, we are so ashamed with what our governments are doing across Europe and America. So South Africa is emerging as a global beacon of hope, and this is great news. But I'm curious to know how it is going to be enforced.
Yeah, I think that's all of our concern at the moment. I'm going to go to Firoza, one of our staunch human rights activists and PSA member and Livewire. Firoza, if you can unmute yourself and come on screen, that would be great.
Thanks, Nazim. I've unmuted myself, but if I don't switch on my camera, please forgive me. No, I think I'm quite excited. I mean, I'm feeling a bit euphoric about the ruling. I think it's the previous ruling wasn't very explicit. I think it's now quite explicit. So that's great. I think your question around how can it be enforced is very important. And but I think more than anything, it also gives countries an avenue now to impose sanctions. And I hope South Africa now can lead the way in terms of imposing sanctions. I think that is the one action that can be taken to isolate Israel even further. So that's my take from this. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, but we also have a major national election on Wednesday. And we know that can also impact on the way forward. So we're hoping for a very positive outcome in that election, so that those who have led this campaign perhaps can retain their majority, especially on the national front, so that we continue in this trajectory, a long overdue trajectory. And while we applaud South Africa, and rightfully so, it's been the hard work of activists over the last 30 years to push for this, for the government to take this matter to the ICJ, and even to take their matter to the ICC. I'm going to let Ismail come in, and then Fasiha, if you can get ready for a little input as well.
Nazim, thank you, Nazim. Just have a question in terms of the timelines, because obviously the operations that are carrying on at the moment need to be stopped as a matter of urgency.
Mm-hmm.
My thoughts are that if we're going to wait for all this process to go forward, that means there'll have to be a Security Council meeting, and then the US will veto it, and then it will go to the General Assembly. What is the timeline of all of this? Because it will mean that in this period, while all of this is happening, Israel will just continue with its actions. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for the comment, Ismail. I think it's the reality, and unfortunately, even as we speak now, the atrocities are still going on. And as time goes, we ourselves must never allow ourselves to become numb to the horrendous crimes against humanity that are being committed, the acts of genocide. I mean, for me, it's also significant because they've cited the Genocide Convention. Aslam and Usman and Dr. Salah, you guys are legal people. You could come in there as well. And just how significant is it that they have cited the Genocide Convention specifically in their ruling? Fasiha, you have a question or anything?
Good afternoon. Assalamu alaikum. I hope everyone is keeping as well as they can be. Yeah, so I think as South Africa, and I'm always bringing it back home, but I think as South Africa, particularly my question actually is to the lawyers in the meeting, is do we have to wait on a declaration from the ICC or the ICJ in order to pressure our government to place sanctions on Israel? Or what are the means that we can use in South Africa to kind of initiate that sanctions on Israel? And then also, it's interesting, the elections is coming up. We have pro-Zionist, pro-Israel, pro-apartheid political parties that operate and function in South Africa under democracy. Definitely going to release something on that soon before the election day. And hopefully, that will kind of inspire some sense of consciousness in voters in South Africa. But yeah, how do we put pressure on our government to sanction basically Israel now? Without waiting for more rulings or the ICC to come back to us. And then I think I have a question around the Israel embassy and shutting it down in South Africa. If there's any legal advice there as well, because it was tabled in Parliament and there was a motion passed majority in favor of shutting down the Israel embassy, but it's still It's still obviously in Pretoria. It hasn't been shut down yet. So there's some delay around that as well.
As you can see, the rest of the world is applauding South Africa. The South Africans are saying it's not enough. We need more from our government. So great stuff. And we cannot let the guard down. Certainly, there are still demands on the table with our government, and they will need to continue. My concern is, from this ruling and from previous rulings, is there a case to be made against those states that are supplying weapons to Israel? Should there be a finding of genocide? I don't know. There is investigation now. Is there implications for the US and for England and France and all these people that are in Germany that are openly supporting Israel? Who'd like to go first? It's open mic. Implications for foreign states that are supporting Israel? Even South Africa, if there is, Aslam?
Yeah, so let me just go the first question that Ismail raised and then come to your question that you've raised now. Ismail raised the question of how long does it take for the United Nations, the Security Council, and the General Assembly? I don't know the timeline. It's dependent, but what we can say is the ICJ has acted very quickly. And it has, within 2 to 3 weeks, given South Africa a hearing. So that must be commended. Coming to the issue of, and I think it leads to Fasiha and your question. One is, can South Africa unilaterally impose sanctions? And the answer is yes, provided the South African government rules on that. It is a sovereign state and it can do so. There is nothing stopping it. And then coming as far as the implications are to other countries, the UK has had an internal report which has indicated that, in fact, it is supporting the Genocidal Act, and so has the United States. They're refusing to listen to their own internal lawyers as far as this is concerned, and they're seeking to cover that up. The implications are that once genocide is determined in terms of the genocide case, which is still pending, remember, these are all what we would term interlocutory applications, then these countries would definitely be liable. It is therefore up to the activists who have been doing tremendous work in pressurizing the governments of these countries who are allowing, currently that pier that America lied to the world, which said it will be for food intake, is currently being used to ship and to dock military equipment for the Israeli army into Gaza. So it is, I mean, more cynical than just them assisting. They are actually actively promoting the genocide.
Yeah, so serious implications there, and obviously a legal course needs to go through. All in all, I think still a positive outcome, but lots of work still needs to be done. What I really want to pick up on is, I think this ruling, what is positive about it, and Usman, Dr. Salah, you guys can come in, is that it emboldens our activists who have been speaking out, particularly our students on the campuses. It just reinforces that they are on the right side, that their positioning, their determination, their militancy as well is justified. Usman, your take on that for the movement?
Yeah, sure. For the movement, yes. But if I may just quickly on the legal obligations that states now have. Yes. My understanding that the states are prohibited under international law from providing arms to states where there is a risk of genocide. That is an established principle of international law, and under various conventions that the states that are supplying arms have signed up to, such as the Arms Trade Treaty, the same applies. It is prohibited to provide arms to a state where there is a risk of genocide. So not that there is genocide, but that there is a risk. And what is the evidence of risk? That the ICJ, the highest court in the world, has stated that there is a plausible case of genocide and added to that these necessities of additional provisional measures. That is the risk of genocide. So the obligation is to not provide arms. The US is in breach of that treaty, okay? And the UK is in breach of that treaty.
Okay.
By absolute certainty. Absolute certainty. But so what are the obligations on other states? Other states, all states that have signed the Genocide Convention have a duty to prevent genocide. It doesn't specify what you must do, but the state must interpret that in accordance with its own democratic wishes or its own political will, what that requires to prevent genocide. Now, South Africa is a sovereign state. It has a duty, a legal duty, to prevent genocide, has been doing that spectacularly more than any other state. And its duty, in fact, would be to apply sanctions. And every state should do that. That is within their remit, they're in their power, and it's their moral duty, because there is no greater crime than genocide. It's the crime of all crimes. So if we tolerate this, what are we saying about us as human beings? What is our red line for humanity? And if I quickly plug in why I'm wearing a red jumper here, I'm on strike. We're doing a red for Rafah strike every Friday. And I know South Africans have been getting involved. That's a way to unplug ourselves from the global economy as a way of protest to the incompetence or impotence of our political leaders to do their legal obligations. So this is a way to be involved. But I'll leave the mic now.
Thanks, Usman. Firoza, come in.
I think we need to just give Comrade Yvonne a chance to come in, but I just want to add to Comrade Usman's very great input that we should not wait for that month as organizations. We need to move immediately through our media, through our organizations on all platforms and start pushing governments and companies who are complicit, companies that are wavering, even our trade union movements to start going on to another platform. So I think let's not wait for that month. Let's use this moment and start building and intensifying even more than we can,
I think 100%. We need to use the space that we have and the momentum. Thanks, Firoza. Yvonne?
I would keep the pressure up and go for some high-profile targets like Britain and America and let them feel the pain of international law. It's about time that there was an understanding of how important this is and how the President of the United States needs to understand and respect international law. And quite clearly, he's doing neither at the moment. So I think that this is a great success, but let's keep the pressure up. 90% of the world's population are with us. It's just those who are in the pockets of the Zionists who are trying to resist. But when you get the President of the United States criticizing a court for calling out Israel's genocidal behavior, that's truly shocking.
Absolutely.
So, Generation Z are leading the way in protest, and South Africa is leading.
Nazim, I noticed that Kit Kittredge has joined us as well from the flotilla.
Who's this?
Kit Kittredge.
Kit.
Hello.
Hi,
yes.
Kit. How you doing? Okay, great to see you with us.
Thank you so much for having this forum. And thank you so much, ICJ, for what an incredible job. Kudos to them for taking the high road. And I really agree with the former person who called that 90% of the world is with this ruling. And I'm with U.S. Boats to Gaza and Freedom Flotilla Coalition. And we sail to end the blockade of Gaza and for the freedom of Palestinians. And our boat is on its way right now. But we are working constantly here and I'm in Washington State. And every day we are in the streets and on the corners and calling. And that is definitely the majority of the U.S. population. Of course, the Zionists get, more time on TV because our TV is corrupt. But this is a huge, huge day, and I'm so very grateful to have this ruling. And the U.S. is just sticking its head out, and it is shameful. And they're probably going to. I don't think Biden or Trump is going to be able to make it at this point. I think this particular item, the Palestinian issue, is just bringing the world all together with the peace and justice that we have to have as our ruling candle, in the world. We have to have that. And I'm so excited here, particularly too, because of the young people. Last night, I was at a gathering with hundreds of young people who are in the streets and super active for this and supportive of this ruling. So thank you. I just want you to know that that is the sentiment here in a way that it isn't being reflected in the news, but it's really in the streets. So great work, South Africa.
Great work to you guys as well. I saw some of the footage from the hearings. Biden is, what's his name? The foreign minister there being challenged, and some of our people even risking arrest. So well done to the American comrades, Kit and others, and Anne and so forth. I think there's also an implication for the flotilla because apart from it just being a humanitarian aid mission, it is also about challenging the whole hegemony of the United States and Israel. And one of the things that we're working on very hard with Ismail and the others is to try and get South Africa to flag the flotilla so that we can hopefully get some of that aid and break the siege on Gaza, because that is ultimately the goal, is to break the siege, to give Palestinians the independence of being able to receive their own aid without necessarily having to go through 1,000 checkpoints with Israel. Dr. Salah, we're going to start closing up. So over to you first.
Yes, thank you. About many our colleague to talking about this meeting, and I think yes, Israelis they don't care about the international law and the same what the GCA say. And now we continue destroy the building in Rafah and continue to make massacre, continue to make war crime, continue to make a genocide. I think it's very important to this way, but we must go another way to make demonstration, talking, discussing, media, go another tactic, asking in the country to stop it in the genocide in Gaza and to stop it in the siege in Gaza. And exactly, Board Rafah, if he closes in the now Board Rafah, it's closing 3 weeks ago. That's mean about any material he don't come in Gaza. And we ask United Nations to talk about in Gaza because all of the Gaza is don't found in the food, in the material to person, to humanity, and wall to make electricity in hospital. Exactly. Now he destroyed 5 hospitals in North Gaza. In Al-Auda Hospital, Kamal Adwan Hospital, Al-Yaman Hospital, and another places, medical center, small medical center, in the doctors he make it. Now we must movement and the same go in the criminal court to continue to asking the Karim Khan to be power and to don't make balance between a resistance and the occupation. We have in the rights to resistance in the occupation. That's rights about in the international law respected, and all the United Nations resolution he respected about in this. And we know in Karim Khan, if he coming, he make double standard and continue about in the double standard. But it's a good way, and he send it message in Netanyahu and Gallant. Now you under in the accountability, but it's not enough. We must continue. I think most of the people in Gaza he very, very dangerous way now. Many thousand in person. He under in the now under in the يعني he don't found under in the sick, under in the don't found in the food, don't find water. He live about in the very يعني difficult humanity places because he trafficking more time in Gaza, and the places he don't found any needs. What he need about in these places, he retain back in the places, destroy it in the occupation. And the occupation continue to destroy all of the building in Gaza because he need Gaza not be in the life. He impossible be in the life about in the person like this, and he in the gold outside in Gaza. And that's the same. He continued to make settlement in the West Bank, continue to and war crime in Jenin in another country in West Bank, and the same. He continued to occupy about in the Al-Aqsa Mosque. He given permission to settlement to settler to enter in the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and the same. He continued to punish and make torch about in the prisoner, about in the jail in the Israeli prisoner, and the same. We don't know any information about in the prisoner in Gaza exactly. Person in the occupation catch him and he go on another places. We don't know in these places, and after we get we make monitoring and file about in the some person he be in the jail Israeli. He talking about in the torch, talking about in the bad situation, without food, without water, without medicine, without anything, and this he make it really terrible issues. It's not humanity, not lawyer, not law. Israeli apartheid state, terrorist state, Israeli capital state. He don't care about anything, and we must to continue our struggle and resistance in this state to stop it in the occupation. And I think it's very important what the South Africa make it, at what the lawyer he make it in all the world, to go in the court, in the nationality court, to communicate about any person he supporting the Israeli occupation and genocide. Thank you about everything.
Thank you. Next, Dr. Salah, legal doctor from Gaza, and we hope that he can return and be with his family soon, and that this genocide can be halted. There's also going to be a lot of rebuilding. But he raises a very important question, and I'll go back to our go-to person, our key advocate that has been advising PSA and been with us from the very first ICJ presentation, Aslam, the ICC, and Karim Khan's call for arrest warrants. I don't think that they've come back to issue those warrants yet, but the prosecutor is requesting those warrants, and in likelihood that they would be issued. This is also another major significant shift that is going to be very hard for Israel to walk back.
Yes, so I just want to emphasize something before we go to the ICC. And I'm just looking at social media and how the Israel and its supporters are going absolutely nuts. Because the ruling of the ICJ today specifically state that Israel must immediately halt its military offensive in Rafah. And 100%. Israel is rejecting that. Its supporters are, like I say, going crazy, trying to the method of attack of the Zionists and of Israel is to try and minimize or dehumanize any person that opposes them. So just to mention that this ruling is crucial, that Israel must immediately cease all military action in Rafah. And that is fundamental. That's equivalent to what we're saying is a ceasefire. if we want to look at it in that way. Yes, the ICC ruling and Karim Khan QC's order has come under criticism from both sides. But Israel is certainly afraid. Netanyahu and his entire group are afraid. He has submitted it for the final warrants to be issued. That is correct, but they have made a decision. And the decision is that Netanyahu is to be charged as a criminal. The implications of that, for example, Norway had indicated that if Israel, and so has France, by the way, and I'm talking about just the European countries, the rest of the world will definitely do it. But these are significant because these are in the NATO alliance. And they have indicated that if Netanyahu is to step onto their soil after this warrant is issued, they will arrest him. Mm-hmm. And that is significant. That is significant because there is now a split, and there is a recognition that the criminals of the world cannot just continuously go free without any implications or with impunity. So, yes, it is a significant shift, and it is an important shift. You know, people have also been criticizing and saying, what's the ICJ rulings and what's the ICC rulings? But a battle is never fought on just one aspect, on the military aspect. It is a multi-fronted, multifaceted struggle against an injustice. So if it takes place by way of media, if it takes place by way of court actions, and again, for South Africa, you know, it makes us proud. It's just been phenomenal. So yes, the ICC rulings or warrants that are to be issued are just going to be a fantastic aspect. By the way, if you heard Biden, sorry, can you hear me still? Are you there, Nazim? Hello.
Right. I can hear you, Aslam.
Right. Oh, okay. So I think Nazim's frozen for a while. But I think that the ICC rulings and just particularly the United States view that the ICC does not have jurisdiction is just an ununderstandable legal aspect. It is understandable from politics, but it also shows the United States hand very clearly that it too is not prepared to abide by international rulings.
Thank you, Aslam. We're going to take final comments from everyone and then just sum it up. I think absolutely. Let's just remind ourselves. There's a clear, unequivocal call for Israel to cease and halt its genocidal assault on Gaza. That all its military operations need to cease immediately. That comes with implications. The isolation of Israel and its exposure as a rogue state with rogue leaders is something that I don't think that even their best spun doctors are going to be able to turn around right now. We're going to go through to whoever I've got on the screen and just for final comments on the ICJ, the ICC, its implications, and what is it that we need to be doing, because we always look forward. What is the task at hand? And then just keep it to just over a minute, and that will be great. Can we start with Yvonne Ridley?
Yes, it's not just about the isolation of Israel. We need to isolate Israel's closest and most powerful friends. And the West might not show it, but it does feel this action quite acutely. The foreign ministers and Blinken, he is really starting to show signs of strain now. And of course, having the law on our side makes them squirm even more. And that's where we need to put the pressure on with Israel's friends to show them that there is a cost. I think it's frozen
there again. Okay, we got the gist of it. We froze a little bit. I think the connectivity is a challenge. We're going to go quickly to Fasiha.
Yes, I think in terms of moving forward, actionable steps would be.
Is it me or is it everyone?
At least. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. I think there's a problem on Nazim's side, but we can hear you, Fasiha.
Okay. I was saying in terms of actionable steps, since it was clarified, thank you for the clarification earlier, that South Africa can impose unilaterally sanctions on Israel, to figure out how we can demand for that from our government, and push for that in the coming days, inshallah, God willing.
Oh, thanks, Fasiha. Ismail?
Yeah, I'm just happy that we are winning these legal arguments. But again, for me, the concerning thing is the timing of the implementation of all these rulings. Thank you.
Thank you. Kit?
Yes, I agree with everybody's comments. We have our work to do here as we are the #1 culprit supporting the rogue regime. So we're just going to keep on pressuring and getting everybody on the right side of history here. Thank you.
All the strength to you guys who are on the battlefront of the struggle, the popular struggle. Usman, also on another front in the UK.
Perhaps just a personal expression, which is that I found this whole journey to be so draining and such a roller coaster. And I wanted to say that the moments that have given me hope is when talking to others who are part of this community, that have given me a sense of belonging, a sense of connectedness, and a sense of value and humanity. So keep on with that. Keep connecting to others, and remember that we're never alone.
I really appreciate that, because I think you're sharing a sentiment that we all feel. We are stronger together, and it has been, when you look at the kind of violent assault, the sense of helplessness sometimes on the ground, the mercilessness with which the Israelis have assaulted the Palestinian population, not just from this war, but for the past 75, 76 years. We need each other, and we give each other strength. So thank you so much. Firoza?
Thanks, everyone. I'm covered, Nazim. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So, Aslam, final thoughts from you, and then we're going to close up, and hopefully we'll keep the connectedness from here.
Yes. So I think fundamentally it's what's coming across from everyone. Just remember that this is unraveling decades of propaganda by way of Hollywood, by way of the newspaper controls, by way of creating a narrative that seeks and sought to frame the oppressor as the victim. And this is a very important shift. We've got the world momentum. We've got people squirming, politicians squirming under the pressure. And we need to keep that on, because we're fighting for something that is right, that is just. And, don't isolate yourself, get into communities. Yes, it is depressing at times, but there are victories. And the victories it's an ongoing and it's a rolling process. So I think strength to all of us.
Thank you. South Africa, we go into a major election this coming week to choose the ruling party nationally and in our provinces. I haven't been in an election, and we've only been able to vote post-90s. That where Palestine was a central issue in all of the discussions, where every political party had been called on to pronounce. And I think there are certain political parties that have come out with flying colors. And for our people out there who are listening in, especially those on the YouTube channel, I think it's important to reflect on this, because when someone can pronounce positively and stands firmly with the Palestinian cause, with human rights in general, and then have the conviction to take it to the ICJ, there is a genuine commitment to humanity and to human rights, and we need to see it for what it is. We know that there are a lot of problems within our country, within our own needs, with the poverty, the economic inequalities that exist, so many other local issues that we need to deal with. But we need to consider who is it that we would want to lead that change in this country going forward. And for this, we as the PSA are saying that we're not saying who you should vote for, but we are saying quite clearly that there are political parties that are so pro-Zionist, so pro-Israeli, that are now, like Islam says, running helter-skelter because their idols and their entire thinking of Israel that is untouchable, that is so just, so moral, has been exposed for what it is, and that is an apartheid, racist, fascist, genocidal state. I think for me today, what is clearly significant is what we've been noticing since the first rulings, and even before that, is the significant shifts with regards to people on the ground, the mass mobilization that is taking place across the world. This is really inspiring for all of us, and it's saying that there's a new generation that is not going to be hoodwinked, that's not going to buy the lie that is Israel, and will all the lies that they spawn through their very, very effective propaganda campaigns. We know mainstream media needs to be challenged as well. I think we take courage and we take strength that what we are fighting for has been emboldened, because now the highest court in the world has said that what we are saying is correct. There is genocide that needs to be investigated. And this is the point I'm really pushing for, is that we need to push our government to get an independent investigative group into Gaza as soon as possible. We need to make sure that we have this, because that's going to add more legitimacy to the claims of genocide. And this is something that we have to do urgently. But with that also, we need to push, and here I'm speaking to our flotilla people and our other humanitarian aid groups, we need to push now for that aid to get through. I don't hold much that Israel is just going to automatically turn off the switch and stop bombing Rafah and Gaza. That is probably going to happen in the next days, maybe even months, because this is what a rogue state does. This is the nature of a state that is so arrogant that it believes it's untouchable. And there will be repercussions, there will be consequences for that, as we are seeing with the arrest warrants and so forth. For us, I think in South Africa, it is a proud moment, but it also tells us that we have a lot of work to do, and it's an opportunity to tell our government, let's do more. Let us set the example. I'm going to share just a small example that I heard from the late ANC stalwart, Ahmed Kathrada, and he said that in the 1940s, late 40s, when India took South Africa to the United Nations and asked for the expulsion and called for sanctions, the South African government laughed and said, what sanctions can India put on a newly independent state, put on South Africa? We're not dependent on India. And if you remember in those days, all your maize was carried in Hessian bags. And there's only one state that was supplying South Africa with Hessian bags. So you had an entire crop, maybe 2 seasons, affected by not being able to have Hessian come to South Africa. So this is the power of a state taking sanctions, and we mustn't undermine it. We also on the ground need to continue with our actions in terms of the boycotts, divestments, and sanctions campaigning, and we will take that forward. Importantly, UNRWA, the United Nations agencies, need to be empowered and supported and protected in the days that come ahead. Last but not least, I think we hear that there's a continuous call, and there's all these yellow ribbons that are going down saying release the hostages. Let us also get the narrative right, that Hamas was prepared to release the hostages on an immediate ceasefire. But when we're saying release them all, we're also saying release them all. We're saying release the 10,000 prisoners, many of them who are women and children, who have been in Israeli jails for decades, some of them. We say release all of those captives that you took in Gaza, release the bodies that you have captured and taken from Gaza, and help us release the bodies that still lie under the rubble. Let us be consistent that when we say release them all, we're talking about all of the victims of this genocide, particularly those who have no voice and have been totally isolated and held to hostage by the powerful nations of the world who refuse to see that what Israel is doing is genocide. I thank all of you, all of our panelists. I say strength to you. Our work continues, and God willing, we will see a free Palestine. Amandla. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for hosting it as professionally as you always do. Thank you.
Thanks, buddy. Okay, Kit, Ismail, the flotilla breaking the siege. We've got to up our game as well. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. See you, Doc.